First of all, I want to say thank you and welcome to everybody. Thank you for giving us an hour of your time. I am Elizabeth Schneider. I am the host of the Wine for Normal People podcast. Many of you know me. I am the author of this book also. And we are here today because over the summer, I had an opportunity to be invited to this wonderful, wonderful seminar on terroir that was presented by these three fantastic people who are going to talk to you about it. And immediately after, I wrote to Laura and I wrote to Jane and I said, look, I know you did this for the trade. I know it's important that they know about it, but the people that really care about this are normal people. And they are going to base some of their decisions and thought patterns about wine based on some of this really important research that we have in front of us. So I will tell you a couple of stories before we get started. The first is, and we will discuss all of these, is that, terroir has been something that's been a bit of a confusing topic over time. First of all, when I first started at the Big Hulking Winery, as many of you know that story, that's how I started in wine officially. I had an educator. I was so excited about the concept of terroir. And actually my ex-stepmother was a horticulturist. So I knew a lot about gardening and all of this other stuff. And I was so excited, like, wow, this is so cool that it shows up in grapes too. And it shows up in wine. And the educator said to me, that's a bunch of bunk. That terroir does not exist. It's just crap that French people made up. And it's not true. Then a few years later, after I was out on my own, I was at this event about Riesling, and the foremost expert on Riesling, Stuart Piggott, great guy, he's been on the show a couple of times. He was talking about Riesling and about the flavors of Riesling and how important it was that things tasted in a certain way. He was, representing the wines of Germany. And I was with a bunch of other sommeliers. It was a bunch of other sommeliers and then me, which of course, again, fish out of water. And he pulled me aside. All they wanted to talk about was slate. All they wanted to talk about was soil. And I was asking him, okay, well, tell me about the flavor. If that's what you want to talk about, let's talk about the flavors. Let's talk about what's going on. And Stuart pulled me aside afterwards and he was like, I'm going to stick a pen in my eye. It's not just about soil. It's about so many other things. And if you don't talk about how it relates to flavor, you have missed the point entirely. And this is why, again, these three people are here, because we're going to make this session practical and it is important. The bottom line of both of these stories is that there's a lot of confusion in general about what terroir is. There has heretofore been a lack of scientific research. It has been sort of this magic thing. I will give you two definitions of terroir, and then I'm going to pass it over to the panel. The first is, of course, in a very shameless self-promotion from my book, page 44. I know you all have it. So of course you've already memorized this, but the way I define it is that the most important concept in wine is terroir. Terroir is a French word that has no precise translation in English. It includes some concrete things and some more philosophical concepts. On the concrete side, terroir is the land of the vineyard. It's the elevation, slope, soils, subsoils, which lie deep in the ground. We will talk all about those. Water drainage, sun exposure, access and proximity to water and climate. And these are things farmers or vignerons, winemakers or growers, normally the same person in France, worry about. Terroir also includes the idea that every piece of land is unique and has characteristics that no other piece of land in the world has. It's the special sauce that gives each vineyard the ability to produce grapes of a certain flavor that is not replicable. The idea of terroir is a little cerebral, but after you taste wines that are expressive of the place where they're grown, you'll understand that only that piece of land could make wines with that taste, for good or for bad. That's terroir. The OIV, the International Organization of Wines and Vines, or Wine and Vine, has defined this as terroir is the concept which refers to an area in which collective knowledge of the interactions between the identifiable physical and biological environment and applied viticultural practices develops, providing distinctive characteristics for the products originating from this area. Terroir includes specific soil, topography, climate, landscape characteristics, and biodiversity features. And what I'd like to say about that is that that hints to culture as well. So it's not just the hard stuff, it's also some cultural things about how we interact with the land. The three people on the panel: Jane Anson, foremost expert on Bordeaux in the world. She was a senior editor for Decanter on Bordeaux for over a decade, or maybe even two. She has struck out on her own. JaneAnson.com. Everybody should subscribe to this website. It is insanely fantastic, just like Jane. She has written so many brilliant books: Inside Bordeaux, Wine Revolution, Bordeaux Legends, Angelou, Club of Nine, everything. So she has done so much. She is the most normal, down-to-earth voice in wine. She's brilliant, and she will be here to talk about how terroir affects the old world and how this study affects the findings in the old world and how the collaboration happened here. The study would not be possible without Dr. Laura Catena, who is a fourth-generation Argentinian vintner. She is a physician. She's an author. There is nothing that this woman does not do. She was born in Mendoza. She graduated from Harvard Medical School at Stanford. She still practices emergency medicine. She makes all of us look like we are the least busy people in the world. She founded the Catena Institute of Wine to make Argentine wines stand out. And her curiosity, her scientific background has made this study possible. Also, her ability to collaborate with people all over the world. She knows literally everybody in wine and is so well liked. And then we have Fernando Buscema. He is a fifth-generation winemaker born in the heart of Mendoza. He knows so much about wine. He graduated with honors from the Don Bosco School of Enology. He has gone to the UC Davis. He is the executive director of the Catena Institute of Wine. He is a dorky researcher, just like we love it, and he is going to talk all about this study. So I'm going to hand this first off to Jane. Welcome to the panelists. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And Jane, I would love for you to talk about what this study has meant to you and you know, the things that it's done for you in terms of studying Bordeaux and the, as I said to you, zero pressure. You're just representing the whole old world. It's really no big deal, right?
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's brilliant to be here. And I'm super excited to be part of this panel because as we were saying earlier, me and you don't have to do very much. We just have to kind of introduce, put it into context and say how we're feeling, but we can also sit back and listen again to the astonishing stuff that these guys have found at the Catena Institute. So I'm based in France. And here in France, you know, terroir is accepted much more widely than in most places, but it's still controversial. I live in Bordeaux, I'm not in Burgundy. So Burgundy tends to kind of hog all the limelight when it comes to terroir in France. Bordeaux has a bit of a tougher time. I think here people really do think it's marketing, maybe it's been dismissed for so long. And a lot of my kind of interest in wine over the last nearly 2 decades I've been working in wine is trying to understand the sense of place that comes through. And I want to know practically, why does a wine taste the way it does? And when I'm trying to describe a flavor in a wine, I really want people to see that there's a practical link between how the wine is made or where it's from and what it's actually going to taste like. So I've been thrilled, you know, to read this. I also would say one of the things I like about the way that terroir is taught in France is that it puts people at the heart of it. So you have all the things that you guys were talking about in the microclimate, the slopes in the vineyard and exactly where it is and the soil types. But it also makes quite clear that none of that actually can do anything unless you have somebody who cares about making the most of that site. And that's something that we've seen so much with Laura at amazing vineyards like Adriana that she's you know, really, really found and nurtured and made these incredible wines from. And I would say that had this study come out of France, it would have been dismissed, exactly as your teacher said to you when you were learning about France. Basically, people would say, oh, it's just the French going on about terroir again. You know, that's just, it wouldn't engage people. And what I think is so important about what the Catena Institute has done is they kind of have brought Argentina and California and the new world into this idea that there are truly special sites which are worth preserving, which are worth investing in and which are worth really celebrating. And I really think that it's just very important that it has come out of a different part of the world from France. So I've lots to say about it, and I know I'm going to come back in later, but I really want to hand over to Laura, because there's just so much to get through, and I know we're not here for long enough. And these two are the experts, so let's move on to their wonderful, wonderful research.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Jane. It's so exciting to be here. So this is a little bit about what we do at the Catena Institute. We spend a lot of time doing research, and a couple of years ago, when we were figuring out why are we doing all this, we came up with this phrase, science to preserve nature and culture. And what we've realized is that if we want to preserve wine as it is today, these regions, what Jane was saying, these special sites, we will need to use science, because climate is moving too quickly. We don't have the time that the Cistercian monks had, in the 12th century, to do trial and error for 400 years. So we really need to study these places. We need to understand terroir if we want to preserve it. And that was the goal of the study. And just for everybody to see are the Instagram handles in case you want to comment. And we also have some Twitter handles in another slide. I think it's really important that wine drinkers and normal people care about terroir, because if you don't care about terroir and tasting terroir in the bottle, maybe some of these regions won't care, or producers won't care about preserving these flavors. So the next slide, Fernando, I think is an intro to Jane. And I just want to say that Jane, I've known Jane for so long, and she's an expert on Bordeaux, but she has taken such great interest in Argentina. And she's one of those people that is a real champion, like Elizabeth. They're people who champion what they believe in. And so I love the fact that Jane has taken time to understand our research and to promote it in Bordeaux, because some people say, okay, the French, maybe they're snobby, they think their wines are better, but actually our variety, Malbec, comes from France. And the inspiration for so many things like terroir, the concept of terroir, comes from France. And I think to have an ambassador like Jane in Bordeaux, who loves Bordeaux and France, she's British, but she also really cares about wineries around the world, is very important, because she's our ambassador for the whole world in Bordeaux. So thank you for playing that role, Jane. And wait, I think Elizabeth, are you done did you want to maybe about Jane's website?
No, I mean, I think I've already said janeanson.com. It is such a triumph. This is her finally striking out on her own. And if you do not have the Inside Bordeaux book and you like Bordeaux, it is the best book on Bordeaux. You really don't even need to buy anything else besides this book. It has all of the information. And the way that it relates to this, it's not just a commercial for Jane, is that the amount of time that she has spent studying the terroir. I mean, and it's difficult. I will say this, Jane, you can, sort of bounce off this. Bordeaux doesn't have slopes. It's not like you were just in Burgundy. It doesn't have the kind of excitement or the drama that you're going to find in Moselle or in the Northern Rhone or even in Burgundy. And so then you've got to dig deeper. And I think that you've done that, which is amazing. You don't have this dramatic landscape to deal with, but
one of the things I said when I was doing the research was, I think one of the reasons people don't talk about terroir in Bordeaux is because it's such a big region and it is so complicated. Right. There's so many different soil types that it almost becomes just so tough to do. But I have a chapter when I talk about terroir, and I can definitely say I rewrote that chapter more than any other part of the book. I just kept rewriting until it made sense to me, and so I hope it makes sense to other people, because I'm not a scientist. So I got wonderful research from a guy we're going to talk about later, because he was part of has worked with Laura and Fernando a lot, and is a brilliant guy. So he was my scientific advisor, but he was telling it in scientific terms, and I wanted to make it clear for me and for everyone who loves wine, what on earth does that mean to the wine you're selecting in the glass, and how do you know what to buy to go with certain foods, or what mood you're in, or whatever, and how do you relate it to the site that the wine's from? And so that chapter I found really tough to do in a way that it made sense, but I kind of felt really happy now that it really helped me learn things as well by having to go through that process.
Well, and then once you drill down into past the science part and into what it actually means, I was talking about this with Laura and Fernando yesterday, was, the whim. What does it mean, right? I worked for this technology company. They're all about the whim, what it means. That is really, in the end, what we're going to try to get to at the end of the seminar. So anyway, I love that. Yes, the terroir chapter is amazing, but you do go into a lot of detail about the specific soil types, about the orientations, about, proximity to the river. Those things are also very important, not just in Bordeaux, but everywhere. All right, so
Exactly.
let's get started on the study itself.
Okay, very
All right,
good.
and
So
I'm going to put there's a link that I'm going to put in the chat. So please open your chat if you don't have it, and you all can, bookmark this link. Okay, go ahead, Laura.
okay, so this was a study of terroir in 24 different sites all over Mendoza, different soils, different altitudes. Fernando's going to give more detail about the experimental design. But what was really important about the study is that it was published in Scientific Reports, which is a Nature magazine. So very, very prestigious. As you might know, the two big magazines are, Nature from UK, Science magazine from the US. So this study was important in the sense that it was so well done and so well conducted that it was published in a major journal. It's an open source journal, and we wanted everybody out there to be able to see this paper, not just the scientific community. And it is really the largest and most extensive terroir study ever done. So a study like this has never been done in the US, in France, in Australia, in any other wine producing country. And part of it is because we decided to do this study and invest in it. And we thought it was important to show that terroir exists, not just in places like Burgundy, but also in Mendoza. So if you can show the next slide, Fernando. So this is just to give you a little glimpse into Mendoza, because I don't know how many of you have been to Mendoza, but it is a place like no other because of the altitude. And a lot of people are talking actually with climate change about how vineyards in the Northern Hemisphere will have to move north, vineyards in the Southern Hemisphere will have to move south. But another way to reach cooler climate is moving higher. And actually, we made this move in Argentina, a lot inspired by my father, who was looking for concentration, acidity, and minerality 25 years ago, where we planted all our new vineyards in cooler climate regions at higher altitudes. But one thing that's extraordinary about Argentina is that you can go from, if you look all the way to the left, it says region 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1 is cooler. You actually measure the degrees and you add them up. And so the lower the number, where it says some degrees Celsius, the cooler, and the higher the number, like if you go from 1, you see 1389, and if you go to 4, you see 19 and above, 1900 and above. So cooler, warmer. And so in Argentina, you go from Gualtajari Highlands to Lulunta, you see that under local areas. That takes about 45 minutes in a car. Let's go to international areas. If you go from Burgundy and Champagne to Châteauneuf-du-Pape, you're driving for about 7 hours. And we put some of the other international areas there just for you to get an idea. So we have this place, which is incredibly diverse. When we talk about difference in terroir, these are dramatic differences in climate. And we also have different soils, more rocky higher up, more thinner materials like clays lower down. And this is important to understand, because I have been told, Elizabeth, about 10 years ago, I heard from some sommeliers things like, oh, all Mendoza Malbec is the same. And it would make me so mad. And actually, I have this theory that many times you do the greatest things in life when you get mad, because you think, I need to right this wrong. And partly a lot of the inspiration for this research, and Fernando's going to talk about some research that he started 10 years ago while he was at UC Davis, kind of was spurred by these comments of people. And it wasn't just French people thinking that somehow we didn't have terroir in Mendoza. So you want to show the next slide, Fernando? So Fernando, you want to talk a little about the study?
Yes, of course. Hello, everybody. This study, as Laura said, started probably in 2010. And it was amazing. It was at Davis, working with my professor, Dr. Roger Bolton, clearly one of the top scientists in the world of wine. And we wanted to make a good use of the new experimental winery that UC Davis had built. So this project made a lot of sense. So first week working with Roger, he said, Fernando, I'm sure someone else has done this job before. So just take a few days doing some research, go to the library, and let's meet back again in a week. So there was a week later, haven't found anything published, at least on these kind of studies. So he said, okay, probably you haven't done enough, so you should go there, spend 2 weeks studying. This is the name of the librarian, Axel Borg, by the way. We became good friends with Axel. But 2 weeks later, I was pretty much in the same place. I haven't found any other research published on how to measure terroir objectively. That's what we wanted to do. Basically, if you give me a bottle of Malbec with or any other variety, but in this case Malbec, with any no indication at all, I should be able to tell you where this wine is coming from. So I spent like probably 2 months doing this back and forth with Roger. At some point I said, Roger, why don't you help me? So he said, okay, I'm going to do it. So he went to his computer, he typed a few things in. 5 minutes passed, maybe 10, 20, half an hour. He said, okay, you know, I'm tired today. Why don't you come back tomorrow? I'll have some information for you. He came back the day after. He looked like he had gone through a rough night, or maybe not sleep at all. And he said, Fernando, maybe, you know, maybe no one has ever published this before. That's what I've been telling you for 2 months. But anyway, so we decided it was important to do it. And why Mendoza? Well, Laura mentioned this before. One of the things is we have a variety, Malbec, that is originally from Italy, that is planted the way it used to be planted in Bordeaux before phylloxera, so on their own roots. So here is Malbec all the way. The other thing is we have huge climate changes with very short distances, and this is mostly due to elevation. We are at the foothill of the Andes Mountains. When you go up like about 100 meters, 1 degree Celsius goes down, so the temperature changes dramatically. And also we were able to make wine from different parcels with uniform soils. So one parcel, maybe it's 1 hectare with uniform soil in exactly the same way. So me as a winemaker, I had to write a protocol and respect the protocol. I wanted to intervene, but no. The idea was to only let the parcel express itself. And that's quite a unique thing, especially if you do it across continents. So the first step of this project was done in California and Mendoza, 40 plus sites. And then we repeated this study in Argentina for 3 consecutive years, because someone said, okay, but you know, irrigation might play a role there. We have the 2016 vintage as part of this study. We received plenty of water that year. It was dry farm completely. So we were able to assess the impact of irrigation. And I can tell you that the fingerprint of unique parcels is still there in years where supplemental irrigation is needed and in years where no supplemental irrigation is needed. So yeah, we were lucky, but we put a lot of effort on this. Some wines? I think you're mute, Elizabeth.
Yes.
Sorry. So
Well,
Fernando, I think you should explain this, and then you are going to be the main star here. We're going to focus on you. It's all you. You're going to take the slides down. You can do it.
There you go. Wait, I just want to show the map. I want to
show the map first. Absolutely.
Yeah, so if you're coming to Mendoza, you know, you fly in either through Buenos Aires or through Santiago de Chile. If you go to Buenos Aires, it's about an 1.5 hour flight to Mendoza, really easy flight, but you have to switch airports in Buenos Aires usually, or you can go to Chile from Santiago, it's half an hour. And then Mendoza city is about, you know, you have some vineyards pretty close to Mendoza, about 20 minutes away. But the Uco Valley, which is, you know, what I consider the best region, the cooler climate region, higher altitude, is about, you know, 30 minutes. The vineyards start about 25 minutes to an hour from the city. Now, if you look at this map, this is where some of the locations of our vineyards are. And some of the wines that were in the study, the locations, these are commercial wines, where, we didn't do what Fernando said, which was like, in the study, you did all the winemaking exactly the same. You had these little stainless steel tanks. You didn't add any oak or, anything. It was like, let the terroir show. And that's important in a research trial, that you don't be messing around with each trial. But for these wines, we do what I call non-recipe winemaking, which is the wine comes in and we taste the grapes and we say, oh, wow, these grapes are so juicy and the seeds are not bitter and the skins are really, chewy. Let's do some whole cluster because the wine can take it. And the acidity is quite high this year, so we can afford to do it. And then, that might happen with the La Consulta. And then the Lulunta will taste the wine and we'll be like, oh, the pH is a little high because the acidity is a little lower. It's a warmer region. Let's not do so much whole cluster. So we like to, in the winemaking, kind of, help the expression of the place become brighter. And these wines, so the Lulunta, think about it from a warmer region, but older vines. So Lulunta is the place where a lot of the old vines, because the old vines are near the city, because that's where the railroad was, and that's where the old wineries. Remember, these vineyards are planted where nobody had cars, like there was one car in the whole village. And so, people still used carriages with horses. So being near the city was important. And then the one to the left, the La Consulta, is from further south, around 3,000 feet elevation, but a much cooler climate. So you want to stop sharing, Fernando, and walk us through?
Yes. So I guess you all have both wines for the 2018 vintage. If not, just leave us a comment. The 2018 vintage was a very, I would say, a classical vintage in Mendoza. This is usually sunny, cool, because we're in a high elevated location. So even though we have very, very intense sunlight, we have low temperatures because we are up in the mountains, and relatively dry. In these two wines, so the Lulunta, as Laura was saying, is coming from a warmer region. We saw the Winkler classification earlier. So this is region 4. And Lulunta, and La Consulta, depending on the year, could be in between 2 and 3. So from that point of view, you should have some differences in the wine. So let's take a look to them. In color, I have a white background here. I see no big differences, maybe a little bit more color, more intensity in the La Consulta. And in the nose, it's to me, it's pretty much always the same. Lulunta, I get more the red fruit aromas, while in La Consulta, the black fruit aromas. Lulunta is super soft, very well balanced. La Consulta is definitely richer, higher acidity, and it makes sense because you are in a higher elevated location, so more intense sunlight. The way the vines are going to react to the sunlight is like moms. They're going to run trying to cover the kids being the seeds. So the way they produce their own,
or it might, Fernando, it might be a dad putting the sunscreen on. Remember?
Yeah, it happens to me a lot of the time. Yeah. But in my case, it was my mom.
Fernando, while I have you, there was a question about sunlight versus warmth on the grapes.
Oh.
So temperature is constantly discussed. And this is actually a very interesting topic when it comes to all of the components of terroir, especially climate, because people are very confused. For instance, like the river, right? Jane, you probably get these questions a lot too. The river, right? Does the river reflect heat, if there happens to be a river nearby, or does it reflect light for better development of grapes? And so what is the impact of sunlight versus warmth when it comes to sunshine? It's a great question.
Great question. And it's very difficult to study these two effects isolated, but we've done it. So temperature. that is going to define what variety you can grow. You have like Pinot Noir, Chardonnay. Those varieties require less temperature. So if you're in a cool region, you certainly can grow and get ripe fruit from Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. But it's more challenging for Cabernet Sauvignon. That needs more. So like the heat summation, what Laura was explaining earlier, well, that's what Cabernet Sauvignon needs more of it. But until we started studying what was happening in the Adriana vineyard, this unique vineyard located at almost 5,000 feet of elevation at the foothill of the Andes in Mendoza, that was it. But in this case, we have low temperature, like Winkler 1, 2, depending on the year, but very intense sunlight. So what we can get here is, of course, Chardonnay, Pinot growing beautifully, but also Cabernet Sauvignon in the same place. And I haven't found a lot of regions in the world that can manage both. And one of the reasons is the sunlight intensity that is higher. So the mom or the dad, they produce the sunblock. So basically the vine is going to create more of these phenolic compounds like tannins, anthocyanins, responsible for the mouthfeel sensation, the color, and they accumulate on the skin. So basically these are a barrier, a natural one, that the vine is going to create to protect the seeds from the sunlight intensity. The other thing is that we don't have early rains, so we can wait longer. We are not pressed by the weather to pick today. We can wait an extra week, 2 extra weeks, 3 extra weeks. So that is what I think is amazing of this location, that you can grow maybe your Pinot, your Chardonnay earlier in the season, and then you just wait, and you get your Malbecs and Cabernet Sauvignon. I hope it helps.
No, I think it's really interesting. And Jane, do you have any insight about that based on, river, right? So we always say that the best, especially on the left bank, you can see the river, and those were the best, where the best vineyards are located. But is it because of light reflection? Is it because of more heat? Do we have any sense of that at all? Or is that just sort of something that's like, it's all tied in together, I think. And I think that, that also goes along with what are rivers for, right? Rivers are also for airflow. They move air through. There's a lot of natural air conditioning that happens if you stand near the river, these large rivers. So I don't know if it's been isolated.
The river, the Garonne River, which goes up alongside the Medoc, is a really great example of how Bordeaux can be kind of dismissed in some ways, because you see the river, all of those great chateaux are along it. They kind of look at it. A lot of those, like Margaux or Monrose or Latour, they're all kind of along there. And in many ways, people dismiss that, saying, well, the reason that they are so famous is because back in the old days, when water was river transport, they were kind of the closest. So people could see them. They got like a location, and that was what they got the bump from. But actually, when you start looking at the terroir and the actual impact it has, Bordeaux is an oceanic climate. You've got lots of things to fight against in terms of mildew or rot or things like that. And so having the river, and you get that movement of air that you're talking about, is enormously important for keeping vineyards healthy, because they have constant breezes. We don't have the huge slopes as you're talking about. We go up as far as about 130 meters above sea level on the right bank, and on the left bank, really not more than 45 meters above sea level. It's low,
which is 140 feet for you Americans. It's nothing. Yeah, we could all easily walk that. Yeah,
exactly. So having that moving air is massively important, and also you get the thermal impact. So again, because Bordeaux has oceanic climate, for many, many years, what you wanted was grapes to get ripe. This is slightly different now, and we're going to talk about global warming and the impact this has later. But for most of Bordeaux's history, any of those vineyards which had a bump from whatever thing would make them a little bit warmer, helped the grapes to get riper quicker, as long as also the gravel as well, which added heat. So there are other things, but that was a big thing. So the rivers are a crucial part. And before we go back to what you're talking about, I loved so much what you were saying, Fernando. And I think that, Laura, you said something else, which I just want to say again, so everybody got it. You said that the work you're doing, the terroir, helps the expression of the place become brighter. And I think that's such a beautiful way to put it. So you have your wine that comes from a particular vineyard, and the more you do to really understand and isolate the impact of that particular site for all the different things we're talking about, kind of just lifts a veil between us and the wine that we are drinking, and the flavors and everything become brighter the more you understand what it is that you're working with. And I just loved the way you put that. So anyway, that's it. Back to
that's
you.
so beautiful. I want to make one comment. There was a question about the soils in La Consulta and Lulunta. And so the Lulunta is actually right by a river. And Elizabeth, it is, there's a lot of theories about why these vineyards right next to the river are better. And I think some of it has to do with the currents and the, you know, also a little bit of humidity that helps the vines be a little less stressed. And, you know, there was this old theory of stress the vine, but actually a vine that's too stressed shuts down, you know, whether it's by heat or not enough water. So you have to be very careful not to stress the vine too much. You know, I feel it's the same as people, you know, a little bit of stress, we work harder, too much stress, we break down. It's no different for a vine. But in terms of the difference in soil, so in Lulunta, this vineyard is right by a riverbed. So there are some stones, there's some sand, and it's a deep soil, but it's very well drained because it is right next to this river. The river is actually with very little water, but so you're at the vineyard and then there's like a deep dive down, and then there's where the river was, where you see a little trickle of water, because we only get waters sometimes of the year when the glaciers melt. So we do get some of the air, the current, which is very nice in Lulunta, but we have a deeper soil. And that is also a very important question that somebody asked, because when I was told by people, oh, Mendoza is all the same, you know, we said, we need to study these soils. And what we found was incredibly big differences in the soils. And it has to do with the formation, the alluvial formation. So if you're a glacier and it's the ice age, many millions of years ago, and you're melting down and creating soils higher and lower, what happens? The bigger stones stay higher because the little river is trickling down. It can't carry the big stone. And so usually higher altitudes, and La Consulta is a higher altitude than Lulunta. Remember we said around 3,200 feet elevation versus around maybe 2,700 feet elevation. So one is higher, and La Consulta is also further south. But we have some bigger stones in La Consulta in the soils, and this provides drainage. And they're covered in calcium carbonate, which is the component of limestone. And so that also, these stones at higher altitudes, these big stones also have an impact. And usually at lower altitudes, you see, in the middle, you see gravels. And then at lower altitudes, you either see clays, sands, and sometimes gravels if there was a river going through that carried the gravel. So it's not easy to generalize, but yes, these two sites have different soil. Lulunta is deeper, more sandy. La Consulta is more gravelly, more shallow. So
Okay.
maybe I'll make an intro to this slide. So Jane knows Kees van Leeuwen really well. He was part of our webinar that we had with, you know, that Elizabeth attended that inspired this conversation. And Kees is a researcher for Bordeaux, who is an amazing human being who loves to collaborate with people all over the world. And he talks about this concept of terroir as a cultivated ecosystem. And I want you guys to pay attention to all these words you see here: water, radiation, temperature, viticultural techniques. These are all the components of terroir, and these are all being threatened by climate change. Rootstock, plant material. The plant material, some plants are more resistant to drought than others. There is so much research that needs to be done about all these topics because of climate change. And that's why we are so excited about collaborating with other parts of the world, because there is no way that one winery, it doesn't matter if it's a big winery, little winery, medium-sized winery, can solve this complex topic. Jane, can you tell us more about Kees? Because I know you work with him very closely.
Yeah, sure. So Kees is originally from the Netherlands and has been in Bordeaux for many, many years. He worked with Chateau Cheval Blanc for a long time. He was their technical director, always a professor as well at the university, doing a ton of research. And in fact, one of my light bulb moments for even writing Inside Bordeaux was I was doing a year-long tasting degree at the Institute of Enology, and he was one of my teachers. And I'd met him before as a journalist when he was working at Cheval, but sitting in his classroom, listening to him speak. And really, it was just such an incredibly important moment for me because he's so clear. You know, he really obviously knows his stuff back to front, but you can be a scientist and you can know stuff, but you can't actually convey it to people who are not scientists. And he's just so clear. And as he was talking about the impact of these different soil types in Bordeaux, I just sat there thinking, why don't people talk about this more often? And it really made me kind of, it took another probably 8 years after that class before we finally got together and did this. And he was the guy who was my scientific consultant on the book. But it was really a moment when I thought this needs to be talked about more widely. And I also want to say, so what this slide tells you is the complexity of all of the different kind of elements that go into understanding terroir. But if we can just bring it back to something much more practical, which is the value of wine. How much is somebody prepared to pay for a bottle of wine? How much should we as consumers value and care about these different wines that we're tasting? And there is an inextricable link between believing that where they come from makes a difference and caring about protecting that wine. And so if we're looking over the next 10, 15 years, 20 years longer, exactly as you said, Laura, the impact of global warming is coming into, or I don't think we should say global warming. I think it's about the more chaotic climate that we are facing. So yes, there are areas that are warmer, but there are also areas that are more at risk of frost or flood, or so many different elements to come into. But if we believe that terroir is real, and if we believe that it really adds something to the wine that we love, then all of a sudden it makes sense of why we should be caring about this, why we should be investing in this research, because it does take, as you say again, it takes a village to get this research out. It's not a single person or a single region or a single winery. It needs everyone to come together and to do this kind of research. And I think that if we can understand that there is a value in doing it, then we can find the people and the brains and the investment in order to do it. So yes, so that is what I'd say. And I think that Kay's is doing such a great job of helping people understand that.
Great, thank you, Jane. That was amazing. Fernando, you want to talk about these two drawings?
Yes, of course. So one thing that we wanted to measure, because of course, we have all these factors that Jane, Laura, and Keith mentioned, but clearly when we talk about terroir, there's always the question about the soil. What is the influence of soil on the quality of the grapes and the uniqueness of the wine? And again, we did the paper thing. We went to the library, we tried to gather all the information that was out there, not a lot published. So we said, okay, we have to do it ourselves. So we're in the middle of that. We're about to publish the first paper. So I promise we will send a copy of it with Laura to you as soon as it's out there. So what we found is in the Adriana Vineyard, at 5,000 feet of elevation at the foothill of the Andes, 2 adjacent parcels. And because of the way the soils are formed, as Laura explained before, basically is rivers, ancient rivers, carrying material from the Andes on the west to the flatlands in the east. We found riverbeds and river banks right next to each other. And that's what we got here in the Adriana Vineyard. These two parcels are maybe, I don't know, 60 feet apart, 70. So it's walking distance. One has deep soils and a deep soil, and the other one has a very thin layer of soil, and then it's all rocks, round rocks. So this is like having, and it's all planted with Malbec. So imagine you're at home, you have 2 plants, picture your favorite plant, and you purchase 2 clay pots. One is small, and you can only have like, I don't know, a gallon of soil. And then you purchase a bigger clay pot for the other vine or the other plant. And this one is like 5 gallons. And you add the same water, the same exact amount of water to both. The plant in the smaller clay pot is going to grow less compared to the one in the bigger clay pot, basically because you have less soil. Less soil is going to retain less water. And if you have less water, you have less growth. And this is what we saw here. And this was a huge opportunity because the only difference was soil. And the vine on your right-hand side grows less. It has smaller leaves. The canopy, so the leaves are kind of more open. So the clusters are more exposed to the intense sunlight. And if you measure only, for instance, the temperature at the cluster zone, the one on your right-hand side on the rounded stones could be 5 degrees Celsius. That's, I don't know, 9, 10 degrees Fahrenheit higher compared to the ones planted in the deep soil. And this is amazing. This is like changing your Winkler zone by just walking 60, 70 feet. So we've been studying how the physical, chemical, and microbial, I'm not going to talk a lot about this pot. Laura is a huge fan and she's going to do it in a minute. Components of the soil influence the vine physiology, the grape composition, and in the end, the wine uniqueness. And I think we have a picture that is not that nice, but it's nice. Laura, I think you're on mute. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so this is actually a photo of those two parcels. So to the left, you see the deeper soil. You don't see many stones in it. And to the right, you see all the stones. And this is a photo taken with a phone because we're never there at the right time for the photographers. But you might also notice that there's all these, flowers and little shrubs and things. A lot of this is native vegetation. And one of my call to actions, and I put this slide in many presentations to people like you who actually drink and buy wine and who visit wine country, is that we really need to change the perception of the beautiful vineyard. So the beautiful vineyard with the nicely pruned everything, and you have this people actually cutting things to make it pretty, which is people with back problems, and like a lot of these beauty enhancing things take energy of people that could be doing other things, other work in the vineyard that's important. Actually, biodiversity work takes a lot of work from people because you can't do it with machines. But so these beauty enhancing things are of no good to the quality of the wine. And actually, the research we're doing in Adriana, which is a fully organic vineyard, is showing that with the enhanced native vegetation and the bees and all the what you can see here, like you can imagine all these microbes and worms. Actually, the first year when we went organic, we actually had a reduction in yields, and slowly that's recovered. And this is a lot of what people who do biodynamic farming believe in. But I am convinced that people like you who are wine consuming, normal people, need to demand vineyards that look a little disorderly, like my house. Not vineyards that look perfect, because that is the antithesis of good wine and good for nature. Yeah. So, okay, so let's, River Stones, Fernando, walk us through this wine. I don't know how many of you were able to get this wine.
Here it is.
But I'm sure somebody was able to. I don't know if any of you were able to get this wine, maybe put it in the chat. This wine is actually, we make less than 4,000 bottles for the whole world, and most of it is actually stays in Argentina. So I'm not sure how many people were able to find it.
But let's also point out that this is basically, would you like to talk about the scores? Because we're going to talk about this because, again, you guys listen to me and you know how I feel about scores. Well, Laura feels the same way, except that she produces this wine. And the problem for it's not a new region. I mean, they've been making wine since the 1500s. However, kind of new to the world since they drank everything before, thanks a lot, guys, before the financial crisis. I mean, in order to get your wine out to people, you need to get something like what you got on the Adriana vineyard. So could you talk about that some, Laura, because I think it's invaluable. I know we're talking about terroir, but in order to get to the place where someone will listen to you, where someone, all of Jane's friends that are in Bordeaux will listen to you. You sometimes need to get the 100-point scoring, or her buddies over at Latour are not going to listen. So talk about that, Laura, because I think that's a really important conversation.
Yeah, so this wine, the Adriana Vineyard Riverstones, this vineyard is around almost 5,000 feet elevation, really special soils as well. It's all Malbec, ungrafted from Massal selections, really an old selection that comes from one of our oldest family vineyards, received 100 points. It was the first Argentine wine to get 100 points from the Robert Parker publication. And it was the first from South America, actually. And this was a very big deal. This wine is now quite famous because of this. And we've actually now have 6 wines with 100 points. And I'm always embarrassed about the points because I am also one of those people that hates the points. It's kind of like, a grade for a wine, which is a horrible thing because a wine is this beautiful artisanal thing that comes from tradition. And how can you put a grade on it, especially when it changes by vintage and everything that happens? But I have to say that for a region that was so incredibly unknown up to maybe 15 years ago, to get these high ratings makes a big difference because a lot of people do care. And yes, we now sell not this one, but one of the other Adriana wines and another wine, Nicolas Catena Zapata, through the Negociant network, which Jane knows very well. These are the Bordeaux merchants who for hundreds of years have been selling all their Bordeaux wines. And for them to have a wine with 100 points from a region that their collectors don't know makes it a lot easier to sell the wine.
So the wine. So this parcel, we were talking about a study that has no oak, everything is the same. What we're trying to find with that study, if there are unique parcels out there. And this is one of the unique parcels. It's 2.6 hectares. That's what, like 5 acres or so. And then we need to understand how to let nature express itself at its best. So we need to check what's the right harvest date, and if we use more or less oak, and if we extend the maceration or not. And this is an important point, like maceration. We used to think that Malbec behaves more like a Cabernet Sauvignon in terms of how you need to make the fermentation and maceration process. Basically, I know probably I'm not going to convince a lot of you that my job is so important, but it's like preparing a tea, because it's hot water, when in this case the must, the juice that is inside of the grapes, when you crush them, it's some kind warm, 26, 28 degrees Celsius. That's what, 80 Fahrenheit. And you have the skins and the seeds. That's kind of the tea bag. So basically you're preparing a tea in your fermentation process. But if you treat Malbec the same way as Cabernet Sauvignon, you don't get the best results. What we found is that it's more like Pinot Noir. It's more gentle. It has more fruity red aromas. So when we understood this, I think we started really making an excellent Riverstones, because we were able to respect what is unique of this site, but we needed to discover what is the best way to treat this parcel. And we aged this wine for about 18 months in French oak. It's not always 100% new oak. I would say almost never. We try to keep a balance between the fruit, the uniqueness of the site, the aromas that are unique to the grapes from this parcel, and the oak elevation, the elevage that is typical in the Bordeaux wines is going to help us probably to smoothen the tannins, maybe increase the aging potential, but it's only a thin layer of complexity that is not going to cover what's out there, that is the wine. Let me taste it. So 2017. 2017 comes right after 16. That was the coldest and rainiest vintage ever. Not a bad thing for us. I'll explain in a minute. 17 is a typical vintage, but very, very small. So in this case, we needed to anticipate the harvest because the vines would only have like half the normal yield. So the ripening period shortened. And if you would just go to the vineyard the same day that you go every year, you would have missed the right point and you would have end up with a wine that is overripe, and you don't get any overripeness here. So that's the other thing. When you have this kind of disordered vineyard, organic farming, you have to be there every single day. And I think that's important. And that is when men, women become really part of terroir because you are there.
Thank you, Fernando. Let's go to the next slide. I think, Elizabeth, we're at the hour. Shall we go quickly through this wine, Elizabeth, or?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And then we'll wrap up. I know some people have to drop off. If you do need to drop off, the recording is going up on YouTube. So don't worry, you don't have to miss it. Also, if you missed anything or we went too fast or something, you can always watch it. It'll be on the Wine for Normal People YouTube channel.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this wine briefly. So this is from the Nicasia vineyard, which is actually very close to the La Consulta appellation wine. You know, we were having Lulunta, which was the warmer, and La Consulta, which is further south, cooler climate. So this wine comes from a vineyard in that general area, somewhat shallow soils. It's a Massal Malbec selection planted in the 1990s. And I named this vineyard after Nicasia, who was my great-grandmother, who was my real grandmother because my grandmother died in a car accident, very unfortunately, before I could know her. But my great-grandmother, Nicasia, was this very loving person. And this particular region, which is called Paraje Altamira, the wines from here, the Malbec, has really soft, velvety, they almost feel sweet, the tannins, but it doesn't have sugar. We've actually done some research on this, and it's polysaccharides, which are sugar-like molecules, but they're not sugar in the sense that, you know, they're not going to harm you like sugar does. But this wine is extremely velvety. Again, look at your Malbec and look at the color. There's a reason why Malbec used to be called the black wine in Cahors in France, because it has more anthocyanins than the other Bordeaux varieties. You'll see it's very dark, but very smooth, smoother and more velvety than a Cabernet Sauvignon. And I just love this vineyard and I love this wine. And what is the vintage that maybe they have?
I believe 16.
16. Okay, so you're also looking at a very cool vintage for this wine. So this is one of my favorite wines. So maybe, so we don't want to miss this part. So this is what I'm obsessed about. You heard that I'm a medical doctor, and there's probably some doctors in the crowd, but we all know how, you know, we used to give people antibiotics for, you know, a bronchitis or a cough or so many different things. And what we found was that we were killing people's bacteria, inside bacteria. So today, when you give somebody antibiotics, which we still need for maybe a cellulitis, a skin infection, and pneumonia, you tell people to take probiotics or to drink kefir yogurt. Now, the vine is no different than people. Vines need these rhizobacteria that live in the soil. And we did this incredible research where we found, and I'm going to explain this slide that is kind of crazy in a minute. So we did this research where we found these rhizobacteria that are bacteria. Rhizo means root. They live with the roots, and they help the roots absorb nutrients and withstand water stress. And these two vines that you see here, the one to the left, which is all kind of tiny and a little sad, is in a little pot where none of these rhizobacteria were added. These were rhizobacteria from the Adriana vineyard. The one to the right is a little vine potted where some of these plant growth promoting rhizobacteria, that's the plus PGPR, were added. And you look at this vine, it has greener leaves. So actually the vine produces more you know, of the photosynthesis absorbing chlorophyll on its leaves. And then it's happier, it's a little bigger, it's more balanced than the one on the left. And so I think there's a huge future on the study of these rhizobacteria. And we even found that in the two parcels that Fernando was talking about, and this hasn't been published, so I can't say too much, we had different populations of bacteria, just like people have different populations of bacteria in their stomachs. And that says a lot about your health. which bacteria are in your stomach. And so I think that this is a field that's really important for sustaining our farming practices, because this affects not just vineyards, it affects everything. And I think it's something that we need to pay a lot of importance to. And I think it also might be part of the explanation for why organically farmed vineyards or biodynamically farmed vineyards make better wines. So Elizabeth, I don't know if I explained it correctly.
Yeah, you did. There's been a couple of questions, a few comments and questions about soil that I would love to get answered,
Okay.
if
Yes.
you guys don't mind.
Yes.
The first thing is differences that you found on yeast microflora and different vineyards from in biodynamic versus organic. And also Constanza wanted to know about, she's in Barcelona, wanted to know about native yeast versus selected yeast.
Yes. Okay,
Whether it
so
has an impact.
I'm going to answer the first question, and Fernando, if you want to answer the second question. So we have done research looking at the microbiome at different altitudes and in different parcels. And I can't give a lot of specifics about this because some of it has not been published, and you can't talk about a researcher's unpublished material. But what we have found when we've done the Illumina sequencing, so the same machine that can sequence human DNA can also sequence soil. So we used to only be able to know 10% of what the bacteria were in the soil by culturing them. Now with Illumina DNA sequencing, we can see yeast, we can see bacteria, we can see fungi, we can see anything that's in the soil. So we do see that in different terroirs, even two soils, one next to the other, like the picture Fernando showed, the yeast are different, the microbes are different. And in the research we did, we actually looked at yeast in the grapes and yeast in the soil, first on the top soil and then in the deeper soil. But this is very preliminary research. So to answer the question about yeast, we do know that the yeasts are different in different soils at different altitudes, in different vineyards. There's incredible diversity. Now, exactly how those yeasts affect the final flavor of the wine, we are still researching that. And, part of the issue is, are you allowing for the native yeast to do the whole fermentation? And we have, a winery where we do small parcels where we don't add any yeast, and then we have a different winery where we do add some yeast. So we work under both settings, and I do think that native yeast will maybe express terroir better because every year they will be a little different depending on the weather. You'll have more or less of a certain yeast, so they could become the expression of terroir. And I'll let Fernando talk more, but the main answer I'm giving to this question is, yes, we've done a lot of research, but we still know almost nothing about exactly how the different yeasts affect the final flavor of the wine. Fernando, do you want to comment?
I think you did a great job.
Yeah, you don't have anything to add. Okay. And this map, I just wanted to show this because we were talking about collaboration, and we're doing this incredible study with Benjamin Bois from University of Burgundy, who is looking at Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Aligoté all over the world. And we're doing microvinifications with the same method of winemaking, what Fernando was talking about, we did for Malbec, but we're now collaborating internationally. We have students come from Burgundy to Argentina. And this is so exciting to be able to be doing this work with somebody in Burgundy when, if you think about it, most people in Burgundy 20 years ago would have said, I have nothing to learn from Argentina. And now in Burgundy, they want to know what happens to Pinot Noir in different climates. And in Argentina, it's really exciting because we have Pinot Noir in both zone 2 and in zone 1, and even in some zone 2 to 3. So actually Benjamin is very interested to see what happens in these different altitudes, not just because the altitude, the temperature, and also the sunlight intensity we were talking about. So this is really exciting collaboration. Yeah. And this is just like all the different universities that we work with, University of Burgundy, Institut Jules Guyot, Universidad de Cuyo, our local universities. And this Eve is the organization that Kees van Leeuwen is one of the founders. And so again, I want to when you go visit wineries, I want you to go and ask them, like, what kind of research are you doing with people from other parts of the world and with your local institutions? And that's the other cool thing, is that local scientists are really eager to work with wineries, but often wineries don't want to work with them because they're different cultures. And actually, I think we've shown that you can collaborate. And I think the world needs to do research and collaborate to solve all the challenges of the future.
And I think that is a huge part of the study also that we have discussed before, which is that research has really become so polarized. I think, I mean, Fernando, you probably could talk to this very well. I mean, it's like, who's funding the research, and is it self-serving only for the winery? And if it doesn't have the findings that they want, does it not get released? Or if they only study one aspect of it and they're looking for it to prove one specific thing, but you can't do that. The point of research is honesty and openness. And if it had turned out that Terroir was a bunch of bullshit, I think that you probably would have said that also. And that's what we need more of, right? We need more transparency and honesty. Interpreting also, research is also subject to interpretation. But if you can present facts, then it becomes easier for people to just look at what is going on here. There are scientific principles here at work, so it's very hard to refute if you have these specific things. There were a couple of other questions. For instance, I really liked Matt's question about, does this study scientifically explain why a soil type makes a wine taste a certain way? Like, why does limestone make a wine more elegant? Why does it give it more, acidity? Do we know that? Probably not.
We hope
right?
so. The thing is, well, with limestone, there is huge debate around the world. It's like you have limestone, you have good soil and good wine. That's not always the case. And what we're trying to understand is like the contribution of the different components of the soil.
And what else is mixed in too? I mean, it's not all 100% limestone is the problem, right? And
and what about microbes? Like Laura was saying, what if microbes are more important than limestone? We don't know. That's why we're doing this series of studies, and we're trying to work in each field with the #1 expert in the world, so that we're not biased, but by our feelings or what we want the outcome to be, because of course there is always bias. So when you work with the top expert in the world, like Benjamin is a great climatologist, Greg Jones as well, Kees van Leeuwen, and so on. Okay, that it's important because they are going to be involved only in projects that are honest about their objectives and hypotheses. And then when you publish in a paper like Nature Scientific Reports, the editors, they don't know you. They don't know my name, Laura's name. They don't care.
And they don't care about wine. Let's be real clear. This is not in wine.
Probably they don't care. Well, maybe
less.
They drink wine at home, I hope so. But basically, if it's good research, they're going to publish it. And if it's BS, they won't.
Yeah, I think that is great. And then Tina just asked, the word elaboration was used in the paper in contrast to, she's a scientist, by the way, aged in the bottle. What does elaboration mean in this context?
Probably just making, so wine making. So the process of wine making, they've used maybe elaboration, poor translation.
Yeah. I think sometimes, this is why we do things for normal people also. And I think also there was another question also, Stephen said that, some GIs were more consistent than others. Does that mean that some regions have more distinguishable terroir?
That's a great question. That's why we had to do this experiment on several vintages, 4 in total until now. The same with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And yes, there are some parcels that don't make unique wines. And that's it. And there are other many parcels that do make unique wines. And that's
figure
okay
out why,
too.
Right?
And unique does not mean that you're going to enjoy it. Maybe it's unique but bad. We're just measuring if it's unique or not. And then we're measuring if we like it or not. And those are two different things.
Well, I mean, doesn't Burgundy somewhat prove that, right? Jane, you were just in Burgundy. I mean, the uniqueness of the terroir within 100, well, I mean, you were talking about this 70 feet or 70 meters. I mean, you have this in Burgundy by row even, where things just taste so very different. And again, it's going to depend on your taste and what you like. And this is a a very important point, I think, that over and over again we have to make, which is like, there are no rules on aging. There are no rules on what you should like. There are no rules on, just set rules on how long you need to decant something. A lot of this has to do with your personal preference. However, structure and components of a wine that go into it and make it good from a sound wine, a wine that has good flavor, I think is fairly, like, I think we're all kind of in agreement on that.
I want to comment on this question of the unique wine.
But then I want to answer Mark's question about aging in the bottle.
Yeah, and I want to comment on that as well, but you can go first on that one. But just the first about the parcelas in this study, the 24, half of them were reliably, you could give the bottle to the winemaker, they could do the chemical fingerprint, different polyphenols, and tell you it comes from this place. The other half, we were not able to predict that. So some of the sites, proved terroir, and some were not distinctive enough. However, all the vintages were distinctive, which is really interesting. There were enough characteristics about each vintage that all the wines, if I gave you a bottle, the researcher could do the fingerprint and say, this is 2016, or this is 2017 or 15. So so whoever made that comment read the study accurately. And the one comment about the aging is that actually Fernando can answer that, because he actually did study if the terroir effect remained through time. 3 years later, if you check the wines again, did they still show the differences? This is based on the study that was done in 2010. So the answer I just gave is for this recent study, 2021. Fernando, do you want to give the answer? And then Jane, you should comment as well.
Shortly about aging. Yes, one of the question is how long this unique fingerprint remains, and it's very hard to answer that question. We try a few nasty things like trying to accelerate. Do you remember, Laura? Trying to accelerate aging.
We heated the wine. We just ruined the wine. We thought we could put it in a heater and it would copy.
Didn't work.
It did not work. No.
So we just needed to wait. So that's what we've been doing since 2010, 11. We bottle extra. So every few years we go back to the wines, we taste them again, we run the same chemical analysis, and we already published the first paper after 5 years of aging. And yes, for a lot of them, we can still find a recognizable fingerprint, more in the case of the wines from Mendoza, Malbecs, than in the case of the wines, the Malbecs from California. But we are still studying that, and we want to understand how long this fingerprint is going to be out there.
But Fernando, what was interesting is that the taste of place became less pronounced with time. So you do lose. It's like, we love old wine, but it becomes a little less different, which is in a way not the result I wanted. I wanted it to be just a. But Jane, you have
I have to go in here, because I really
get in here.
My experience from that is something that's quite different from that, and I would say I'm not looking at it in terms of analyzing the fingerprint within the bottle or the glass. I'm talking about from my own experience of tasting. And if I just take the 2009 vintage for an example, 2009 was a warm vintage in Bordeaux, so you had a lot of fruit when the wine was young. And it was also a time where there was a lot more new oak being used in the winery. That was kind of the fashion. So you had lots of sugar because it was a warm vintage, which means high alcohol. You had a ton of fruit, lots of tannins, and a lot of new oak. So my experience of that was when the wine was young, I was like, okay, it's a great vintage, but I wasn't getting a lot of slight differentiation between the different estates. Fast forward 10 years from that, the fruit has calmed down because it's aged a little bit. The oak is integrated more, so you're getting a wine which is evolved. And that was when I suddenly started to see much more the site influence, because when it's young, the fruit is the thing that's dominant. But as the wine's getting older, then all of a sudden you're also getting the other complexities and the other influences. And I'm sure that is true, that there comes a point at which that is no longer true. But for me, there is a sweet spot where when it's very young, particularly in warm vintages, then I'm less aware of the terroir. And then as it comes through, as it ages, then I become more aware. But I'm sure you're right that there must be a point at which that's no longer true. Yeah. That would be my experience.
We are still studying it. Yeah. So maybe the second decade of this study is going to prove your point. And that's what is amazing. every year we're learning more. We understand more the parcel. We understand which ones can have this unique fingerprint for longer and which ones cannot. And this is amazing. No one else has ever done this in the past.
It's awesome. It's so cool listening to you guys again. It's such an interesting thing you're doing.
It really is. And I think the other thing though about aging, which is I mean, I've got to tell you, like, I feel like everybody here has asked me a question at some point about aging. How long should we age it? And again, this is a matter of personal preference, but we do also have to say that that's another thing that's really never been studied, right? What happens in the bottle that is different perhaps with Bordeaux than with the wines of Mendoza? We don't know. We have no idea. There's a lot out there. People are like, oh yeah, the tannins do this, they do. We don't really know. We don't really know. We do know that some wines age better than others, or some wines age to our taste better than others, right? So some people like an old Napa Cab. I happen not to like that, right? I don't like wines that are, if they're supposed to be real fruity like that, after about 10 years, it gets boring to me. But you know, so but that's my personal taste, right? So like, as the opinionated, you know, person here, I'm happy to say that. But I feel like, you know, there's a lot of people that would put down on a paper in a magazine, this is how long something should age. Well, what if you like that huge fruit in 2009? So we have to also make sure that although we understand the chemical components, you have to trust your own taste. You know, you have to trust what you like. You might have really loved that fruitiness that Jane is talking about, but you don't like the sense of place that it has now. Who cares, right? That's for you to decide. You own the bottle. But we don't know from a scientific perspective. It's important also to put that out there.
Right. And Elizabeth, what I love about this end discussion that we're having is, you know, what is the point of science in wine? Because, you know, there's like, what is wine? Art, science, you know, and there is so much art because, you know, the palate is imperfect, the human palate, but actually, when you do sensory analysis with a trained group of people, they are better at recognizing differences in wine than any chemical analysis you can do. So, you know, the human palate in all its imperfection is actually better than chemical analysis. And that's why we came up with this science to preserve nature and culture, because, and Fernando loves to call himself an archaeologist more than a scientist, you know, because we're trying to preserve this beautiful thing.
Indiana Jones like.
And preserve the good things. Yeah. So I think that some things are good and worth preserving. Some things are bad. So for example, some work in the vineyard is really hard on the body. You know, people who work in the vineyards have back problems and, you know, can't work for very long. So there are some machines that make your work easier. We should incorporate those machines. We shouldn't be thinking like, oh, this should be traditional, handmade and everything. No. Let's see how we can, you know, move forward to the future, protecting people, protecting nature. And we do need science because science allows us to try one thing. Did it help us? Did it not help us? And then we move on. You know, this whole biodiversity thing. Yeah, we all want more biodiversity, but how do you actually get more biodiversity? And can you get more biodiversity and make better wine? Well, that's, you know, heaven. The only way to figure that out is by doing really well done research with good controls. And I think that's really important, this concept, to understand that it's not, we don't want to make test tube wine. We want to preserve wine as it is by using, you know, the scientific method. And we're going to get a lot of things wrong, and that's okay. But we're going to get a lot of knowledge and understand our vineyards so that we might make the best decision.
But Laura, the other thing that you said, which I don't think that you brought up when we were talking about the probiotics and all of that kind of stuff, is, you know, could you inoculate? You said that another person had asked you about, could you inoculate?
Jancis Robinson asked me that. Yeah.
Right. Could you inoculate the soil with that? But I think that your answer, right, is that like, no, I mean, you're not going to do that. The idea is to find the solution, right? So yeah. All right, so we're gonna wind this down. Thank you all so much. I you know, I adore you. Fernando, I have not met you. You're the only one I have not met live. We're gonna have to hang out sometime. Fernando's got his soccer game. He's gonna go kick butt because he's like a star soccer player. Jane is gonna go have an awesome meal in Bordeaux. Laura is gonna go have her coffee because it's like 8 a.m. or whatever.
My friend Aviva that we went to Nepal together, trekking. She's coming in like 5 minutes. I'm so excited.
And can I just give a shout out to Francesca, right? Is that her?
I hope
Yes.
Francesca,
If you're
yes.
listening, hi. And I hope that you will send me an email and we can communicate. It's very fun to have you. And it's nice to have this like roundabout, connection.
Yeah, Francesca works with my son in his chemistry lab.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Francesca, thank you for coming. Thank you for everybody else coming. And I hope that this really did help explain some things to you that might have been a bit nebulous. Pass it on, right? Pass this on to other people. Some of you work in the wine trade. Some of you are just wine lovers and you're trusted people in your wine set. Please pass this on because it's important, and it's important to get the idea across that nature is a thing and wine is farming, right? That is the ultimate thing that I always want people to remember. It is farming, and we are trying to find out science about farming so that we can figure out what is in the bottle. Real wine is farming. So anyway, thank you all so much from all over the world. We appreciate it. And like I said, this is going up on YouTube, janeanson.com. Catena Zapata Wines, Catena Wines. Find Fernando. You can stalk him on Instagram anytime. And please, especially if you're Brazilian, make sure that you get in his face about the Argentinian soccer. And I am winefornormalpeople.com. And thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Gracias.
Bye-bye.